I was sitting in our usual Monday morning meeting, sipping my coffee and reviewing my project notes. The conference room hummed with quiet chatter as everyone settled in. Tom, my manager, walked in with a strange expression I'd never seen before. His face looked cold, almost angry. "Morning, everyone," he said, not making eye contact with me. "Before we start, I have an announcement about some organizational changes." My stomach dropped. Something felt wrong. I'd been with this company for 4 years, consistently exceeding my targets and earning praise from clients. Just last month, Tom had mentioned I was being considered for another promotion. "Marjorie will be transitioning to a new role effective immediately," Tom announced, his voice flat. "She'll be moving from senior project manager to administrative coordinator." The room went silent. I felt my face burn with embarrassment. Administrative coordinator? That was 3 levels below my current position. My colleagues stared at me with shocked expressions. Some looked away, clearly uncomfortable witnessing my public humiliation. "I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. Tom finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "We'll discuss this after the meeting. It seems you violated our trust by interviewing elsewhere without disclosure." My blood ran cold. How did he know about the interview? I'd only told one person. The meeting ended in uncomfortable silence. As my coworkers filed out, shooting me sympathetic glances, my mind raced back to the night before. I'd been washing dishes when I casually mentioned to my husband Louis that I had a job interview the next week. "Really?" he'd said, barely looking up from his phone. "Why?" "Just exploring options," I'd replied. "Nothing serious." Louis had seemed distracted, almost cold. He'd mumbled something about being tired and went to bed early. I thought nothing of it at the time. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 4. I trusted him completely. But now, sitting in this conference room, I remembered something else. After dinner, Louis had spent 20 minutes on the phone with his mother, Peggy. They'd been whispering in the kitchen while I cleaned up. I'd heard my name mentioned several times, but couldn't make out the conversation. Peggy worked as some kind of consultant for various companies in town. She was always bragging about her connections and influence in the business community. She'd been staying with us for the past month while her apartment was being renovated, and the tension in our house had been growing daily. Could she have? No, that was impossible. Or was it? The pieces were starting to form a terrifying picture in my mind. After everyone left, Tom closed the conference room door. I sat there, hands shaking, waiting for an explanation that made sense. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything feel surreal and harsh. "If you're interviewing elsewhere, you're clearly not committed to this company," Tom said, crossing his arms. "We can't have someone in a senior position who's looking for the exit." "Tom, it was just one interview. I haven't even decided anything," I protested. "And how did you even find out about it?" He avoided my question entirely. "The decision's been made. You'll start your new role tomorrow." I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. 4 years of dedicated service, countless overtime hours, successful projects that had saved the company thousands of dollars, all thrown away because of one job interview I hadn't even been sure about. When I walked through the front door, Louis was in the kitchen with Peggy. They both looked up when I entered, and I could swear I saw guilt flash across both their faces. The kitchen smelled like Peggy's expensive perfume, overwhelming and cloying. "How was work, sweetheart?" Peggy asked with a sweet smile that suddenly seemed fake. "I got demoted," I said flatly. Louis frowned. "Why? What happened?" When I explained about the interview, Louis's response shocked me. "Well, maybe you should have been grateful for the job you had instead of looking elsewhere." Peggy nodded. "Companies don't like disloyal employees, dear." That's when I realized this wasn't about company loyalty. This was about something much deeper and more sinister. The next morning at work, I noticed my personal items had been moved. My favorite pen was missing from my desk. My project files had been relocated to a filing cabinet I couldn't access without asking permission. Even my coffee mug had been moved to the kitchen lost and found box. They'd moved me to a tiny desk in the corner, next to the copy machine. Every time someone made copies, the noise was deafening. It felt deliberate, like they wanted to make my life miserable. The desk was smaller than what they gave interns, with a wobbly chair that squeaked every time I moved. I went home feeling defeated. When I walked into the kitchen, I noticed Peggy organizing the cabinets. She'd moved all my cooking supplies to the highest shelves, ones I could barely reach without a step stool. "Just making things more efficient," she said with that same fake smile. Later, I went looking for my old work certificates. I'd kept them in a frame on my dresser, but they were gone. I searched through drawers and closets before finding them eventually, packed away in a box in the back of the closet, wrapped in old newspaper, like they were worthless. The final straw came when I went to make my morning coffee. My favorite mug, the one my late father had given me for my college graduation, was nowhere to be found. I searched everywhere before checking the trash. There it was, sitting on top of the garbage, like it meant nothing. My new job title was meaningless. I spent my days filing papers and answering phones, tasks any temp could do. They kept me around, but excluded me from every important decision. I'd built half the systems they were using, but now I wasn't allowed to touch them. My computer access had been restricted to basic programs. At team meetings, Tom would ask for input from everyone except me. When I tried to contribute, he'd dismiss my suggestions with a wave of his hand. "Let's stick to the current process," he'd say, as if I hadn't designed most of those processes myself. Home wasn't any better. Peggy had taken over the kitchen completely. She'd criticize everything I cooked, suggesting improvements that made meals taste worse. She'd rearrange my spice rack, reorganize my recipes, and even change the temperature settings on the oven without asking. Even Louis started making passive-aggressive comments about my cooking. "Mom's way tastes better," he'd say, not even looking at me. The worst part was how they talked about me like I wasn't there. Peggy would make comments about people who don't appreciate what they have while staring directly at me. She'd tell stories about ungrateful employees she'd known, making sure I understood the parallel. One evening, Louis looked at me across the dinner table and said, "Maybe it's time you stopped acting like a victim and started being grateful." That night, I didn't cry like I usually did. Instead, I grabbed a notebook and started writing down everything that had happened. I couldn't sleep, so I sat in bed thinking about how this all started. 3 years ago, I'd been so excited about landing this job. I was young, driven, and ready to build something real. I'd worked 2 jobs through college to pay for my business degree, graduating with honors despite the financial stress. Peggy had been polite back then, even supportive. She'd congratulated me on my promotion to senior project manager. But I remembered now how her smile had faded when Tom mentioned his niece had also applied for the same position. The conversation had grown awkward, with Peggy asking pointed questions about my qualifications. "Well," Peggy had said that day, "I'm sure Marjorie will do her best." There'd been something in her tone, something I'd missed at the time. A hint of resentment, maybe even disapproval. She'd started asking Louis more questions about my work after that, always framing it as motherly interest. I remembered another conversation from months later. I'd been excited about a successful project launch, talking about my career goals over dinner. Peggy had listened with that same fake smile, occasionally interrupting with questions that seemed designed to minimize my achievements. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she'd said. "Just don't get ahead of yourself." At the time, I'd thought she was being protective, warning me about workplace politics. Now I realized she'd been trying to keep me in my place from the very beginning. The signs had been there all along. I'd just been too naive to see them. The next morning, I decided to confront Louis gently. I waited until Peggy went out for her morning walk, something she did every day at exactly 8:30 a.m. I'd noticed she was very particular about her routines, almost obsessively so. "Louis, I need to ask you something," I said, sitting beside him on the couch. "Why did you tell your mother about my job interview?" He shrugged without looking up from his coffee. "I don't know. It came up in conversation. But you knew it was supposed to be private. We've talked about keeping work stuff between us." "Honestly, Jess, I didn't think it mattered. You wouldn't have taken the job anyway. We're fine here. Why rock the boat?" His casual dismissal stung. "How do you know I wouldn't have taken it? You didn't even ask me about the details." He didn't answer, just turned on the television to avoid further conversation. After Peggy returned, I decided to make lunch. When I reached for the microwave to heat up leftovers, I noticed something behind it. A white envelope, partially hidden between the appliance and the wall. I pulled it out and saw my name written in professional lettering. Inside was an offer letter from the company I'd interviewed with. It was dated 2 weeks ago. The job offer was incredible. A senior management position with a 40% salary increase. And I'd never seen this letter before. My hands trembled as I realized what this meant. Someone had hidden this from me deliberately. That evening, I started going through our financial documents. I'd always trusted Luis to handle the paperwork, but now I needed to see everything clearly. The more I dug, the more disturbing patterns I found. Credit cards I didn't know about, investments made without my knowledge, financial decisions that affected both of us but excluded me entirely. What I found made my stomach drop. The house we'd bought together 3 years ago was titled entirely in Louis' name. Even though I'd contributed half the down payment from my savings, my name wasn't on the deed. When I'd asked about it during the purchase, Louis had assured me it was temporary. Our joint checking account showed my paychecks going in, but large withdrawals I didn't remember authorizing. Money was being moved to accounts I didn't have access to. There were transfers to Peggy's accounts, payments for things I'd never agreed to. I confronted Louis about the house title. He acted surprised, claiming it was just easier for taxes and promising to add my name later. But when I pressed him, he got defensive. "Why are you questioning everything all of a sudden?" he snapped. Peggy was listening from the kitchen. She walked over and put her hand on my shoulder with fake concern. "Sweetheart, this kind of paranoia isn't healthy," she said softly. "Maybe you should talk to someone." Then she leaned in closer and whispered, "Besides, it's probably a good thing you never had children. You weren't really mother material anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. The next day, I drove to the company that had supposedly never heard back from me. The recruiter, Miss Martinez, seemed confused when I walked in. The office was modern and bright, completely different from the stale corporate environment I was used to. "Marjorie, I'm surprised to see you. We were disappointed when you withdrew your application, especially after such a strong interview." "I never withdrew my application," I said, my heart racing. She pulled up her computer and showed me an email sent from my personal account. The message was professional but clear. I was withdrawing my candidacy for personal reasons, effective immediately. The language sounded formal, almost like Peggy's way of speaking. "This isn't from me," I insisted. "I never sent this email." Ms. Martinez looked concerned. "The email came from your address. Are you saying someone else sent this? That's a serious matter." I asked her to forward me a copy. When I got home, I logged into my email and checked my sent folder. There it was, the withdrawal email, time-stamped during my morning commute to work. I remembered that exact time because I'd been stuck in traffic, nowhere near a computer. I never sent that email. I was driving when it was sent, but it was definitely in my sent folder, as if I'd written it myself. Someone had access to my email account. Someone who wanted to make sure I didn't get that job. Someone who knew my passwords and my daily schedule. I stared at the screen, feeling sick. Only one person knew all my passwords and had been pressing me to share everything for security purposes. That evening, I confronted Luis directly. I showed him the email on my laptop, my hands shaking with anger and betrayal. The evidence was right there in black and white. Undeniable. "Did you send this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at the screen and shrugged. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Luis, this was sent from my email account while I was driving to work. Someone had to send it from here, from this house, using my password." He stood up, acting annoyed rather than concerned about this violation of my privacy. "Why would I do something like that? That's crazy." "I don't know, you tell me. But someone did this, and it wasn't me." Then he made a mistake. His face changed, and he got defensive in a way that told me everything I needed to know. His shoulders tensed, and he looked away from my eyes. "Look, you never log out of your email, Jess. That's on you. Anyone could have sent it." "Anyone? Or someone who lives in this house and knows all my passwords." He realized what he'd just admitted. The silence stretched between us, heavy with guilt and betrayal. I could see him mentally scrambling, trying to find a way to take back what he'd revealed. That night, I changed every single password I had. I also started sleeping in the guest room, claiming the main bedroom was too warm. Luis didn't argue. If anything, he seemed relieved I wasn't sleeping next to him anymore. I was starting to see my marriage for what it really was, a carefully constructed trap. I decided to start moving in complete silence. No more sharing my plans, no more trusting anyone in this house with my thoughts or feelings. I reached out to my friend Maria, who was a lawyer, under the pretense of asking for a friend about workplace discrimination. She listened carefully and suggested I start documenting everything. I began copying important documents to a private cloud drive only I could access. Financial records, employment documents, emails, everything that might matter later. One afternoon, while Peggy was napping, I noticed her laptop was open on the kitchen table. I shouldn't have looked, but something made me glance at the screen. There was a draft document open, an unofficial HR recommendation suggesting my role should be reevaluated for fit and performance. The document was addressed to Tom and dated from last week. Peggy had been crafting official-sounding language to justify my demotion. I quickly took photos with my phone before she woke up. This was proof that she'd been actively working against me behind the scenes. But how deep did this conspiracy go? The next morning, I did some research into Peggy's consulting work. I called the main HR department at my company and asked general questions about external consultants. What I learned made everything click into place. Peggy had been receiving payments from my company as an organizational consultant for the past 6 months. There was no public disclosure, no paperwork filed with HR. She was essentially on payroll, giving advice on personnel decisions while pretending to be an objective outside party. I printed out the payment records and stored them with my other evidence. Then I made an anonymous report to the company's internal audit department, flagging the undisclosed consultant payments. I didn't specify what was wrong, just that there might be a conflict of interest worth investigating. The next day, I walked into work and acted like nothing had changed. I filed papers, answered phones, and smiled when people talked to me. But inside, I was planning my next move. By Friday, the stress was affecting my sleep and appetite. I'd lost 10 pounds and had constant headaches. My doctor suggested I take some time off for stress-related health issues. I filed for medical leave and packed a single suitcase. Without telling Louis, I drove across town and checked into a long-stay motel. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. When Louis called that evening, panicked about where I was, I simply said I needed space to think. "This is crazy, Jess. Come home." "I'll come home when I'm ready," I said and hung up. 3 days into my leave, I received a call from HR requesting a formal meeting to discuss my employment status. They wanted to meet in person to clarify some concerns. I agreed, but on one condition: I wanted a witness present. They couldn't legally refuse. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend preparing, organizing my evidence, and practicing what I would say. Monday morning, I walked into the HR office with Maria beside me as my witness. The HR manager, Mrs. Thompson, looked surprised to see a lawyer, but didn't object. "We wanted to discuss some concerns about your recent performance and attitude," Mrs. Thompson began. I pulled out my notebook. "Before we start, I'd like to request copies of all communications regarding my recent demotion." Mrs. Thompson looked uncomfortable. "That's not typically how these meetings work. I'm formally requesting access to my personnel file and any communications about employment decisions affecting me." The legal language made her pause. She excused herself to make some phone calls. When she returned, she looked different, more nervous, less confident. "We'll need to schedule a follow-up meeting. Some of the documents you're requesting require additional review." As we were leaving, Mrs. Thompson quietly slipped me a sticky note. On it, she'd written, "I didn't agree with it, but I was told it came from above." That small gesture gave me hope that not everyone was part of this conspiracy. It took 3 days for them to produce my personnel file. When I finally got it, I found exactly what I was looking for, and more. There was an entire email chain between Tom and Peggy, discussing how to handle my disloyalty problem. Peggy had coached Tom on the exact language to use, suggesting he frame my job interview as a violation of trust. One email from Peggy was particularly damning. We need to act quickly before she gets other ideas. Document everything as performance-related, but the real issue is keeping her contained. Another email sent the day after my demotion read, "Good work handling the Marjorie situation. We can't risk her getting out and taking opportunities that belong to others." Peggy had signed that email. "We can't risk her getting out." The emails proved this wasn't about company policy or my performance. This was a deliberate conspiracy to sabotage my career and keep me trapped in a position where I couldn't succeed. I made copies of everything and scheduled another meeting with Maria to discuss our legal options. Maria reviewed all my evidence with the careful attention of an experienced lawyer. When she finished reading, she looked up at me with a serious expression. "Marjorie, this is workplace retaliation, conspiracy, and possibly fraud. You have a very strong case." We spent the next 2 hours crafting a formal complaint to HR. The document was calm, factual, and backed up with extensive documentation. We didn't make emotional appeals or dramatic accusations. We simply presented the facts. The complaint outlined the conflict of interest, the undisclosed consulting relationship, the coordinated effort to sabotage my career, and the retaliation for exploring other job opportunities. We submitted it on a Friday afternoon, ensuring it would be the first thing on the legal department's desk Monday morning. Within 24 hours, I received a call from the company's legal counsel. They wanted to schedule an immediate investigation. By Tuesday, both Tom and Peggy had been suspended, pending a full review of the allegations. Maria smiled when I told her the news. Sometimes the truth is powerful enough on its own. When I returned to the house to collect more of my belongings, Louis was waiting for me. His face was red with anger, and he started yelling the moment I walked through the door. "Do you know what you've done? My mother could lose everything because of your ridiculous accusations." "They're not accusations, Louis. They're facts backed up by evidence. You're destroying my family over some stupid job. Your family destroyed itself when they decided to conspire against me." He followed me around the house as I packed, getting increasingly agitated. When I reached for my father's photo on the dresser, Louis grabbed my wrist. "You're not taking anything else out of this house." I pulled my arm away. "Don't touch me." "Or what? You'll call your lawyer?" He was mocking me, but there was real anger in his eyes. Then he picked up a dinner plate from the counter and threw it toward the wall near my head. It shattered loudly, pieces scattering across the floor. I looked at him calmly and said, "You'll be hearing from my attorney about divorce proceedings." I signed a lease on a small one-bedroom apartment across town. It was nothing fancy, just a living room, bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom, but it was mine. I spent my first weekend there setting up my father's old bookshelf and buying a new coffee maker to replace the one that had been lost. The silence felt peaceful after months of walking on eggshells. My phone rang constantly, Louis begging me to come home, Peggy crying about how I'd misunderstood everything, even Tom's wife calling to plead his case. I didn't answer any of them. On Monday, the company's legal department called. They wanted to schedule a formal mediation session to resolve the matter without going to court. "We're prepared to offer a settlement," the lawyer said. "I'll consider it," I replied, "but we do this on my terms." Maria helped me prepare for the mediation. We weren't just seeking money, we wanted acknowledgement of wrongdoing and guarantees this wouldn't happen to anyone else. The mediation was scheduled for Friday afternoon in a neutral location. The mediation took place in a sterile conference room at a law office downtown. Peggy sat across from me, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen her. Her confident facade had completely crumbled. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her voice shaking. "I was just trying to give guidance. I thought I was helping the company make good decisions." I stayed quiet, letting her dig herself deeper. "You have to understand, I've been working in business for 30 years. I know how to spot problems before they become bigger issues." The mediator pressed her for specifics. "What problems did you identify with Miss Marjorie's performance?" Peggy fumbled for an answer. "Well, she was interviewing elsewhere. That shows divided loyalty." Did the company have a policy against employees interviewing for other positions? Not specifically, but... Then the mediator turned to Tom, who looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Mr. Tom, did you disclose your personal relationship with Miss Peggy when you made employment decisions based on her recommendations? The silence that followed was deafening. 2 weeks later, the company's internal investigation concluded. Tom was terminated for failure to disclose conflicts of interest and retaliatory employment practices. Peggy was permanently banned from contracting with the company and had her consulting agreements with 2 other firms canceled when word spread. The HR report was damning. Unethical collusion between management and undisclosed consultant resulted in improper demotion process and hostile work environment. I was offered my old position back with a promotion and significant salary increase. I politely declined. That evening, Louis showed up at my apartment door. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. "Jess, I lost my job," he said. "Peggy's reputation is ruined, and it's affecting everyone connected to her. I might lose the house." I stood in my doorway, not inviting him in. "I lost everything," he continued. "Please, can't we work this out?" I looked at the man I'd once loved and felt nothing but pity. "You didn't lose everything, Louis," I said quietly. "You gave it away. You chose your mother over your wife," I continued. "You chose to betray my trust rather than support my career. You made your choices, and these are the consequences." Louis' face crumpled. "Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" I felt a moment of the old sympathy, the urge to fix his problems and make everything okay. But then I remembered the hidden job offer, the deleted emails, the months of gaslighting and manipulation. "That's not my problem anymore," I said. "You can't just throw away 7 years of marriage." "I'm not throwing it away. You already did that when you sabotaged my career to keep me under control." He tried to push past me into the apartment, but I held firm. "Please, Jess, I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this." "The only mistake I made was trusting you," I replied. "I've already filed for divorce. You'll be served papers this week." I closed the door gently but firmly. Through the window, I watched him stand there for several minutes before finally walking away. 3 weeks later, I received a call from a local firm that had seen news of the HR complaint. They'd been impressed by how I'd handled the situation and wanted to discuss a position. "We need someone with your integrity and problem-solving skills," the hiring manager said. "Would you be interested in meeting with us?" The interview went better than I could have imagined. They offered me a position as Senior Director of Operations, 2 levels higher than my original job, with twice the salary and equity in the company. I accepted immediately. My first day at the new company felt like stepping into a different world. People treated me with respect, valued my input, and encouraged my ideas. During the team meeting, my new manager asked for my thoughts on improving their project management systems. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. That evening, I bought a bottle of wine and toasted my new beginning in my quiet apartment. A month into my new job, I heard a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Peggy standing in the hallway, looking older and more fragile than ever. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Marjorie, please," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I've lost everything. No one will hire me. My reputation is completely destroyed." She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. "I know I made mistakes, but I never meant for things to go this far. Can't you talk to someone? Put in a good word? I'm desperate." I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or understanding of what she'd done wrong. "Peggy, you didn't make mistakes," I said calmly. "You made deliberate choices to sabotage my career because you couldn't stand seeing me succeed." "That's not true. You were just trying to keep me in my place," I interrupted. "And when that didn't work, you recruited your son to help you destroy my marriage and my career." She broke down completely, sobbing in my hallway. "You were right about one thing," I said, stepping back to close the door. "I did get out." 6 months later, I hosted my first dinner party in my new apartment. I'd made some genuine friends at work, and we gathered around my small dining table with candles and soft music playing in the background. The conversation flowed easily. We talked about work, books, travel plans, life goals. No one criticized my cooking or made passive-aggressive comments about my choices. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. My phone buzzed with a text message from someone at my old company. "It's complete chaos here without you. Tom's replacement quit after 2 weeks. Just thought you should know." I showed the message to my friend Paula, who laughed. "Do you miss it?" "Not for a second," I said honestly. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my couch with a cup of tea and reflected on everything that had happened. I'd lost a marriage, a job, and people I'd thought were family. But I'd gained something much more valuable: my self-respect and the knowledge that I could survive anything.